So the position is that you've asked me why Ireland should consider its position within the European Union. And the reality of that question is that maybe a year ago, prior to Brexit becoming a reality, and the shockwave that that produced right throughout the European Union, that might not have been something that we could have countenanced here in Ireland, our position within the EU. And that's because effectively the mainstream parties have peddled an idea that the European Union has always been good for Ireland. But when you get into the fine point of what Europe stands for and what it's about, and we look at the difference between 1972, the institution that we joined, then being the EEC, to the European Union and how it operates now, a different picture starts to emerge. We're based here in Galway at the moment, and when you look at how this city in particular, the quality of life for its residents has been curtailed over the last number of years, particularly due to the gridlock and due to the lack of infrastructure that we see here in the West. A lot of that leads back to the European Union, particularly prohibitive legislation like the Habitats Directive, which effectively finds that bog cotton and limestone is more important than the quality of people's lives. So there is a frustration here in the West right now that effectively what European law and what European legislation is doing is effectively making a large park out of the west of Ireland. And that, I think, is something that, while we might look towards certain agencies within Ireland, be it An Taisce, be it the National Parks and Wildlife Service, to blame, the reality of the fact is that they are enabled by direct EU legislation that's being implemented here in Ireland. So what we're saying is that bureaucracy, red tape that is synonymous with Europe is something that we need to address here, not only in the west of Ireland, but in Ireland as a whole. The other position in a post-Brexit era is what we do with our trade. And if you look at the statistics, prior to the implementation of Brexit last year, from January to June, and contrast and compare that with the 6 months of this year, what we see is a very noticeable and upward trend in trade with the United Kingdom, and particularly with the US as well. So out of approximately 4 billion worth of export trade in food and drink and agricultural produce that goes out of this country every year, 64% is now going to the UK and the rest of the world. The remainder is within the European Union. So on a very basic level, when you look at the figures and the importance of our export markets, it's quite clear, given the vast amount of trade, particularly from our agricultural sector, that's going to the UK, that the imposition of any import tariffs on the UK market is going to have a very severe and detrimental effect to Irish trade. From farming organisations right around the west of Ireland at the moment, there's also a very, very severe problem in terms of how EU legislation is being implemented and the bureaucracy that that's leading to. So if you take something very, very simple, we've had a slurry spreading deadline here in the last number of weeks, which again has been implemented or has come to light as a result of EU legislation. And what that led to is effectively unsuitable weather conditions where farmers are working against the clock, trying to comply with EU legislation and effectively going out and distributing effluent into our ecosystem at a time when the weather conditions aren't suitable. And make this clear, they have no alternative but to do this because of EU law, because of the bureaucracy and because of the red tape. So what we want to see is a more flexible approach that the agricultural sector could see outside of the European Union, while also protecting our trade with our most important export market, which is the UK. Another real aspect of concern for us here in Ireland at the moment when we consider our position within the European Union should be the budget contributions that we're making year on year. So for years, following our entry into the European Union itself, there's a perception that Ireland has always been the beneficiary of vast amounts of EU money and that it's all coming one way and this has enabled all of our infrastructure to be built. But the reality, when you look at the figures at the moment, is very, very different. So back in 2014, for instance, we see a position where 181 million more was paid in by Ireland to the European Union, as opposed to what the European Union distributed back into Ireland. So again, when you look at this, be it from a direct contribution, a system through CAP towards Irish farmers, or anything else, where we're deriving European funds, be it through the Rural Social Fund or other mechanisms of European funding, we can see that if we were to leave Europe tomorrow, we would have the finance within our own domestic economy, both to maintain CAP payments to farmers and to actually potentially increase that position and ensure that our agricultural industry and our trade continues to